Hey, welcome to Think Tank, where our diverse leaders tackle your diverse challenges. Today we're looking at how to respond when ignored by white leaders who think they know best. I'm Ray P. Ferrer, head witch in charge over at Ray Coach. Won't you join me in welcoming today's smart and sassy Think Tankers?
Hello, I'm Robin Ingram. I'm an assistant vice president at the Fund for Johns Hopkins Medicine, and I'm calling in from Baltimore, Maryland.
I'm Kelly Macias, an equity and inclusion consultant, and I'm calling from Washington, D.C.
Hey, hello, my name is Miguel Yanez. I'm a transformational coach, and I'm calling from Winchester, California.
Great, glad to have you all aboard today. Let's put our heads together on this challenge. Dear Think Tank, at my workplace, we've been having so-called safe space conversations about race in society. These were my company's main response to the national reckoning on racism. I'm part of the group that plans this series. Many times during the planning discussions, a subset of the group, all white, were insisting that one of the ground rules should be don't get political. Some of us, basically all the people of color in the planning group, pushed back, saying that many of the things folks needed to talk about would naturally go into politicized places. Before the series launched, we agreed that we'd table this particular decision and come together again to decide before scheduling the first session. Before the meeting was called to resolve this and some other less important issues, the facilitator of the planning group, a white woman from HR, released the schedule in an all-staff email along with the official agenda for each session. The agenda included the don't get political ground rule. When I asked her why she moved forward with this, even though there was no clear decision, she claimed there was broad consensus on the team and they had to move forward to avoid any further delays. She also defended the ground rule so no one was made to feel uncomfortable in a safe space. I am livid and I don't think I need to tell y'all why. How should I respond to this without becoming the angry ghetto queen of their nightmares? Signed, Royally Pissed Off. All right, Think Tankers, what do we have to say about Royally Pissed Off's situation?
I'm thinking about, some of the things that we have done at work in this space, and there are two themes. One is that it's hard. And there's no perfect way to do it. But how do you do it in a way that people feel heard and feel like their thoughts are respected, even if you don't move forward with those thoughts? And I don't have an answer, but I'm just reflecting on the experience and going back to it's hard work, and there's no perfect way, and not to say that was the perfect way that it was done, but how do we make sure that people feel heard and respected in their thoughts, in their perspectives? And it sounds like the writer did not feel, was not heard and respected in what they were trying to say.
Yeah, this actually makes my head hurt for a whole bunch of reasons, mainly because I've been there. I have been there trying to move these conversations forward and have been told many of the same things. First of all, what does don't get political mean, especially in this environment? If you're not actually getting political, you're probably not doing it right, because we need to have broad conversations about these things, and of course they are political, so I get why the writer of this would feel pretty pissed off about the fact that this was done. I also, just thinking about what Robin shared, these conversations often tend not to center us as people of color, right? They're often done in these very sort of delicate ways to not offend the delicate sensibilities of white folks. And so in that way, it renders them ineffective. So I actually think when we talk about making sure that people feel valued and that they can, feel safe and comfortable, we actually have to do it in a way that prioritizes the people who are most impacted. And so that's a place where I start.
Kelly, can I drill down a little bit on that? So if we center us in safe space conversations, what's going to be different?
I think actually a lot. I think a lot can come from centering us because I think the conversations so often don't center us, right? So I think one clear example in this scenario for me is the white HR person should not have been sending something out without actually checking in with other people of color to find out what would be an approach, right, that she could be led by and not actually be leading. And too often, I think that white folks are leading conversations about racial equity, about social justice, when they might actually benefit, and we all benefit from when they step behind and actually are led by us.
Thank you. I'm just reacting to how all of a sudden it was important to move forward
Right.
and claim broad consensus, whereas that didn't seem to be the priority prior, right? So it's like all of a sudden we can't wait any longer. It's all of a sudden really urgent. So I've got to send this out, as the head of HR. What? Where'd that come from?
Right, right.
But Kelly, I have a follow-up. Well, and anyone else, how do we balance the exhaustion that Black people or other people of color or minorities or people that are different may feel with the responsibility to lead? There's like, oh, this is so heavy, this is exhausting, and then I have to lead, and that's also, that's heavy, and am I doing it right, and everything. How do we balance that?
Gosh.
I think it's a great question. And this person is on this committee, right? So hopefully they had some choice in signing up for it. But I don't have an answer as much as I think a caution or a reminder, consideration for folks to remember that, yeah, it's tough work. And so sometimes you don't always have the capacity or desire to be leading those conversations. And those are things to think about, particularly at work, right? Doing these things, in my experience, often make the work and my relationships with colleagues a lot harder when people become uncomfortable. So those are things to absolutely think about.
Was the head of HR the person that was leading the initiative, or was that more of a mixed leadership on that specific initiative?
The impression I got from the writer is that the HR leader was facilitating the planning group.
Okay, so she
and,
was.
Sometimes facilitating the planning group can get confused with this is my group and I'm in charge, right? So that's two different things when we talk about racial equity, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say, because if she was leading the project, or she was under the impression that she was leading the project, there should be more people or client per se, that are part of the leadership of that event or that initiative. So not only the HR director or person will send an email, there has to be a collaboration in a meeting with everybody together, and make sure that the people of color are also part of those decisions before those emails are sent out. And I think that was the problem, but I think there has to be a way to have everybody lead a balance of leadership of colors and other people in the same committee.
Thank you. And I think it's going to look and feel different from what most white people are used to and comfortable with, right?
Correct.
So it's like a white person doesn't get to be the executive decision maker when we're talking about racial equity. That's actually not how it'll work, right? So you will give that role up in this process at some point. And if somebody calls you on something, you will behave differently as a result of being called on something. You will have to change what you do. I want to react to this whole thing about a safe space discussion centering white people, right? So when we say safe space discussion, we as people of color might be saying it's safe for me to raise my issues at work. But when white people think about safe space discussions, I know from most of my clients who have hired us to facilitate safe space discussions, they think safe is comfortable. Mm-hmm. So, if I'm uncomfortable, then I feel unsafe, right? So it's just a very different use of the word and a very different thing. Like, Robin, I see you reacting.
Yeah, I think that these discussions are going to be uncomfortable for everyone. But when I think of safe, I think it is people being able to share their experiences and their thoughts without there being any backlash. You know, like, are you going to think differently about me when I'm being considered for an opportunity? Are you going to think differently about me in general? Are you going to make assumptions about me based off of me sharing my personal experiences or my personal or the impact of these things? So I think people want to be able to know that they can freely share without judgment, and that's where the safety comes in.
Without judgment, but also without retribution, right? Is like what you're saying there, like, so that somebody's not going to be having at you somehow because of you sharing an experience you've had.
Right.
I'm really intrigued by this notion of safety also, again, because I feel like when we talk about safety and who's not safe, generally, again, people who have always felt safe get prioritized, right? So this idea of it being uncomfortable, you're absolutely right. It's uncomfortable, and it should be uncomfortable. Living with racism is uncomfortable, right? Living with sexism or homophobia or any other ism is uncomfortable. And so I think that people should be prepared for there to be some discomfort. And what's the distinction between being uncomfortable and unsafe, right? Where you feel like you can't function or where you feel like you can't speak up because you are worried about retribution. Those are different things.
What do we do when it comes to raising the voices of the people of color in this planning committee so that the planning committee has something to do with the organization that you're trying to create, right? Because like the safe space conversation is not a plan in and of itself. That's a step on a journey. So what is it? What are we helping to? How can we help the people of color on that team? Because the writer is only one of the people of color who were ignored in this shift in decision, right? What do we do to help them raise up and lift up their power in that group?
The more we include, the more we have a different opinions, different races. The more we include everyone, it's going to be a lot better. But I think the way to do it is to talk directly to HR and let them know that, hey, we need to be in this. We need to be part of the decision makers. We are, part of the company as well.
Well, one thing that comes up for me too is how they are leveraging their individual relationships. So there's them as a collective and what they're doing on this committee. But then I'm also thinking about who they may have relationships with that they can go to and advocate for certain things. In my experience, the way that people of color can often be effective in moving something forward is when they kind of go out and leverage their networks and relationships. So, hey, I talked to this person, Miguel talks to this person, Robin has a really good relationship with this person. And so kind of organizing ourselves around how do we move things forward by like leveraging our networks and our relationships within the organization.
I want to say I love that yes and right there, Kelly, because it's like absolutely we should go to the traditional hierarchy step of like letting the person who's facilitating the group know, but they don't run it. Like the entire collective runs it.
Correct.
Really, so it's like there's something about the image of like coming to somebody with a plate and going, please sir, I want more, that just I hate that idea of like only making the intervention with the HR head. It's also like, wait a minute, we know how to get this done. We organize, we pull our networks in, right? All right, that's all the time we have for today. We heard a lot today about how to deal with this challenge to the group's authority over an individual facilitator's authority. We talked about the how to center safe spaces in a way that is inclusive of people of color and perhaps centering people of color and not only centering white people or people in power. We've talked about the need for direct feedback and direct and indirect organizing when situations like this occur. And also, I will just say it's always important to think, what is the organization we're trying to create? What's the culture or world we're trying to create? And how can we start making that happen now? So we're not dealing with how things are traditionally done, but just making some fundamental changes early on. Thank you, ThinqTanqers. Thank you, listeners and viewers. If you have an issue that you'd like us to have at, please send it to thinktank@raycoach.com. That's ThinqTanq spelled with Q's, and we'll have at it. All right, take care of yourselves, go in peace, and we'll see you next time. Ciao.